A bit different. An article all the way back from the 70s. Notes on Women and Magic, written by Len Lakofka. There will be 4 major groups in which women may enter. They will be fighters, magic users, thieves, and clerics. They may progress to the level of men in the area of magic, and in some ways surpass men as thieves. Elven women may rise, especially to high levels in the cleric profession, but only to elves. Only as fighters are women clearly behind men in all cases. But even they have attributes that their male counterparts do not. Characteristics such as a strength 18-sided die and 1 6-sided die. 18-sided die? Wisdom, intelligence, dexterity, and constitution will all use 3 6-sided die. Any women scoring 13 or 14 in strength may add 1 to her constitution score. Instead of charisma, a woman's beauty is rated on 2 20-sided die, numbered 1 through 10, so the range is 2 to 20, not 2 to 40. Prime requisites: wisdom for clerics, blah, 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 blah. Beauty and exceptional beauty, 15 to 18, 19 to 20, are important to thieves, fighters, and magic users. Clerics may not use beauty if they are lawful or neutral. Chaotic clerics may use their beauty score. I don't want to know what this beauty score is supposedly used for. I will say, though, I am jealous. Women apparently in this version of the game can get magical by principle of being hot. So I guess Natalie Dormer gets the ability to cast Meteor Swarm. See? A bright side to blatant sexism. A few years ago, a friend reached out to me about joining an online Pathfinder game. This was before the pandemic, but our group lasted well into the worst of it. The game master of that Pathfinder game was described as a true master of his craft. Let's call him Lenny. Lenny was a great game designer, but unfortunately a mediocre dungeon master, but that's another horror story. It was a mediocre game, but the camaraderie was enough for me to keep playing. After a year or more, the game wrapped, and we decided on another system, and a player volunteered to take up the mantle as game master. He was a first-timer, so I was kind of helping a bit behind the scenes, answering questions and giving feedback. All is well so far. We decided on a superhero game and landed on mutants and masterminds. The DM asked that we not select our powers yet, but come in with a normal human, fully fleshed out, with backstory. This seemed reasonable, so we all made our characters and decided to go do a Game Zero practice game to figure out some of the rules. Here's where things started going sideways. I made a nurse who served in the military. He suffers from PTSD. Pretty interesting, if standard fare. Another player makes a weed-smoking surfer with mommy issues. Another makes a parkour-loving DJ with daddy issues. They were all fun characters. Our former dungeon master decided to take a different approach. His character has all the backstory. The character is a super rich businessman like Tony Stark who went to school to become a high-powered lawyer like Matt Murdock. He practiced for a few years, then went back to school to become a medical doctor like Doctor Strange. Practiced that for a few years and is also a full-time reporter like Clark Kent. Here's the kicker. No one knows he is all 4 of these people. They are 4 separate secret identities. They all have separate work lives, and he maintains all of them congruently. Also, he believes he is an angel, like an incarnation or maybe a reincarnation of an angel. He may have heard angel voices. I don't remember exactly. Look, he has, at this point, like 5 different secret identities / involved backstories. Here I was thinking I was overworked. You may be wondering how I do it. How I handle being a reporter, a doctor, a lawyer, a tech entrepreneur, and the reincarnation of an angel all at once. Well, the answer is simple perseverance, work-life balance, and determination. I tried to help piece it together into something usable through conversation. I suggest that he could have been a bored rich boy who studied everything, tried on careers, and left them behind when he moved on to the next thing. But no, he wants them all to have offices and jobs, and he maintains all the IDs. Our new GM is humming and umming, but he doesn't say no. At this point, another player and I are goofing a bit on this overcomplicated backstory, no differently than we goofed with each other or the other players. Lenny gets prickly. We work through some basic roles as we explore a carnival in this game session 0. It's obvious the GM is setting us up with tailored skill rolls so we can get a crack at practicing. We come to a point where someone must climb the Ferris wheel. Parkour player steps up to shine. Lenny stomps all over it and rolls without asking or being prompted, even though he doesn't have the skills needed and will be rolling straight attribute. Parkour player is miffed. It's obvious this was his skill challenge. Parkour calls it out. Hey, this was my challenge. Lenny literally melts down like Raiders of the Lost Ark. He begins screaming and ranting and raving, calling Parkour horrible names, claiming we're allowed to get him, saying that we're using meta knowledge since our characters don't know his character. I will reiterate, this is like Game 0 practice with no lasting repercussions. It's not even a real part of the actual game. The Game Master wraps everything up and everyone drops off as the GM and I start to talk Lenny down. For 2 hours. I kid you not, 2 full hours of trying to get him to admit that he may have overreacted. We readily admit Parkour could have handled it better, that we shouldn't have ribbed him about his character concept, etc, etc, etc. Lenny refused to apologize even though Parkour reached out to apologize first. We took a vote and wound up booting him from the group. We did wind up playing and had a lot of fun. I can't imagine how the game would have went if Lenny was allowed to play his confused mess of a character. None of us were the innocent victims here, but I feel like most people, especially for a group of mostly experienced players, would expect a little gentle ribbing and some teasing. TLDR, player creates character with ridiculous backstory, friendly jokes turn into a nuclear meltdown. Obviously, I don't know exactly what was said, but yeah, this is definitely an overreaction, especially since the players came to this person to resolve the situation, to diffuse it. We have a video that released yesterday about diffusing RPG horror stories, and these guys did the right thing. They went to talk to this person, to have a conversation. But unfortunately, it's not a silver bullet, because sometimes when you have a conversation, it's a tad one-sided. And in this case, you got a guy who just does not want to admit his fault in the story. Especially since, let's be honest, it's mostly his fault. He created an absurd character with clear intent to take spotlight in the game and showcase that intent by blatantly stepping in front of someone else during their skill challenge. Does that make you an irredeemable human being? No, but at the same time, you should probably expect some ribbing from that kind of behavior. Ribbing that this guy clearly couldn't handle. And, well, it's probably not a good omen for this guy's longevity in any sort of TTRPG game. My husband is an amazing dungeon master. Usually we play with just the two of us, but after gauging some interest from some newer friends of ours, we started a new group up. Things have been relatively tame, not much role-playing and lots of messing around, but our new friends still all seem to really enjoy it. Then, one of them enthusiastically asks if my husband could create a one-shot for a coworker to give him a taste of the game. He agrees, always happy to introduce more people to TTRPGs. He builds a one-shot adventure as an offshoot to the campaign we are already playing. We build this guy's character, a druid who is currently in the wild-shaped form of a bull and tiger. May have others, but these were the ones of note. We go over the basics of his character sheet and we immediately start off in a tavern. New guy starts the night off on a critical fail and gets his money stolen without noticing. Then he gets knocked into by a drunk. So he immediately goes full bull and starts wreaking havoc in the tavern. We're all a bit shocked at this immediate escalation, but ultimately my husband is happy this guy seems to be embracing the action. The group naturally gets kicked out of the tavern. Our other group mates try to attempt conversation with our new friend, but he looks at them kind of weird, states that he doesn't know them, and his character leaves, now obsessed with his lost money. Our dwarf tries to tell him she saw who took his money and can get it back, but he continues to just run down the road. as a bull. A scream and a crash gets our players' attention. They all rush down the road to investigate. Our druid takes off, not liking being followed by these strangers, and comes to a destroyed carriage. My husband tries everything to get this druid player involved in this event. The druid is still upset about his money and wants to make up, so my husband describes the carriage having been very luxurious. The horses talk about how good their master is and how he was attacked and taken away, so could he please help him? His answer was still no. Well, should we remind you that he has a lot of money? After some more coaxing from our other two players, the druid finally agrees to look into this mystery. The druid is the only one able to track and very easily leads the group through the forest and upon the lair of a giant and two hapless prisoners. Finally, some combat. Everyone's excited. We roll initiative. Giant is first and proceeds to lug a huge boulder towards the druid. It misses. The druid's turn is next. He just threw a boulder at me. I could die. No way I'm sticking around. And he turns into a bull and runs the opposite way. We all stare at him in confusion. We try to coax him back, telling him that combat is fun, but he is adamant about his character foregoing his lost money and moving on. Even this guy's wife, who isn't playing, just watching, gets frustrated, telling him he can turn into a freaking tiger, he should fight. At this point, since this entire session was made for this one guy, we ask him what his character plans to do then. He obviously doesn't want to save the kidnapped merchant and his daughter from a giant, so maybe there is something else we could potentially get involved in? No. Our druid declares he is running away to the nearest town, where he will proceed to get a job, probably at the stables, and make back the money he has lost. We all sit in disbelief for a moment before my husband rolls some dice, confirms that the druid would make it as a stable hand, would have a very comfortable life in the new town, and the game ends. Our new player then sits there confused. It's over already? Dude, you ran away from the story. What did you think was going to happen? We then end the night, all being as polite as possible, with my husband suggesting other types of campaigns he might like, and don't have much action in it, while the rest of us stare at each other blankly, all unanimously deciding that D&D just isn't for this guy. I will say that when dealing with new players, I always advocate for a degree of leniency. New players are new, and they don't really understand how the game works just yet. You can't blame them for making stupid decisions or not understanding mechanics, but here you have a guy who very blatantly ignores the rest of the players. Here, the party is trying to explain to this person what D&D is all about. You gotta pursue the story to some degree. And while D&D is open, you can do what you want. If you completely neglect everything going on around you, there's not really much of a point to playing. And I think that's the big problem here. It's annoying for the other players because they have to constantly adjust to the decisions of one guy, and it's also annoying to the dungeon master who is having their hard work completely ignored and trampled upon because this one person, for some reason, doesn't want to play the actual fun parts of the game. Yeah, I don't think D&D is the right RPG form. Maybe something a bit more freeform will fit their needs more. For starters, I'm a bisexual guy. I've known since I was a teenager, and while not being in the closet, I don't really bother telling anybody because it's not their business. To this day, the only people who know are my exes, my current significant other, and the people in this story. Just as a preface, I'm sorry if I go into random details sometimes. I'm just trying to paint a full picture as I remember it. On to the story, I was playing Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy with a close friend and two of his friends from college who were twin brothers. My close friend, who was DMing, had gotten me really interested in Dark Heresy and 40k because I've always had a love of both sci-fi and horror. The twins, who I'll be referring to by their in-character names, seemed like alright dudes, and I was genuinely excited to play. Now, my Dungeon Master friend had always been someone who was a little too into the weird side of the internet, if you catch my meaning. I never let it bother me though, because usually I would let him know if he was making me uncomfortable with the things he was showing me / telling me, and he'd back off. But in this situation, I think it was the other people sharing his interests that egged him on. So we made our characters. The twins rolled a Guardian Arbitrator combo. Max Napalm, I thought it was a hilarious name, was a barbarian-like Guardian, and Alex Murphy was the Arbitrator. The player for Alex had some kind of backstory for how as a kid, Alex was raised with 80s action films, and RoboCop was his favorite, blah 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 blah. It was an excuse to just straight up have RoboCop in the game, and even though it didn't really fit the lore, we were fine with it. As I was making my character, a psyker, I noticed the DM had created his own character sheets instead of using the ones that came with the game. It didn't matter much to me until I noticed he added an entirely new section for sexual information. It was all things like sexuality, what sensitive bits we have, the size of said sensitive bits. I immediately told the DM I wasn't comfortable with this stuff, and he said, "Oh, we're not doing anything like that. This is a sheet I have from an old campaign." I asked him if I could just strike through it, and then he said, "Well, Max and Alex already filled out those parts on their sheet, and it'd be kind of unfair for them to do it, and for you to get a free pass." I realize now that this should have been the point where I got up and walked away, but I was 18 at the time and significantly more awkward and insecure, so I just brushed it off. I just filled out my character's info like normal, and when I got to the sensitive information spot, I just used average stuff for the quote-unquote stats, and I marked his sexuality as asexual because it felt fitting for him. When I gave my sheet to the DM, he raised an eyebrow and then proceeded to whisper to the other two players about it while laughing. Being the awkward dude I was, God, this is giving me flashbacks. Being the awkward dude I was, I just kind of endured it for a few before asking, "Is something wrong with it?" The DM laughed, handed it back to me, and proceeded to talk about how I wrote down asexual because I can't get laid, and the other players erupted into laughter. I tried to defend it because obviously it's a real thing, but it was pointless. They just kept rephrasing the same joke. Okay, now I'm seriously getting flashbacks. Eventually, it got to the point where they were accusing me of being asexual for some reason myself, and as much as I waited for them to let up, they just didn't, and I just got more and more fed up. Eventually, the jokes died down, and we finally got on to playing the game. To be honest, the setting wasn't terrible. Our characters were all on a massive starship, and the three of us had all unwittingly stumbled upon a conspiracy of some sort. The investigation led us to the lower decks, where we confronted some Lovecraftian horrors. Just as a warning, it gets a little bit graphic here. I'm going to do my best to sense retch while we're getting the story across. After a few turns of combat, the DM tells me a tentacle monster of some sort has grabbed my character from behind. I ask him if I can make a check to get out of it, and he says, "No, since it grabbed you from behind, there's no way you could have evaded it." Cool. I notice at this point, the other two players are snickering and looking at each other, and I ask whose turn it is, and the DM says the encounter is over. He then says, "Let's find out if you're really asexual, though," and begins graphically describing my character being... What does the DM expect to happen after this? Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for just absolutely... It really helped me to just overcome some things, and now I am straight. Obviously, I got pretty uncomfortable and kept asking him to stop before I eventually shouted at him, and the smug dude says something to the effect of, "It's just a game. At least you're getting laid, dude." At this point, I've had it, and I start gathering my things to leave. The DM tries to stop me and says how we can keep playing with your virgin fantasy intact, which just pisses me off even more. He then tells me it's my fault for saying I'm asexual to begin with, and it's okay to have a hard time getting laid. I eventually just got more annoyed with all of this and go into a full rant about how I was trying to play the game, and it seemed they were starting to feel for me, but then I made the mistake of ending it by coming out as bisexual and saying how I'm not super comfortable with sex-related things in the game like this. But just when I thought I was being taken seriously, the joke started up again. This time, though, it was just crap about how bisexuality isn't real. About how if you sleep with a guy, you're gay. Period. So, I just left. None of them ever contacted me again. Not even the DM, who prior to this had been a close friend of mine for years. Can't really say I miss him, though. If all it took to set his sights on humiliating me was having his college buddies around, I can't say I'm too eager to be around him ever again. I really disagree with the phrase, people reveal who they are when they're drunk. I think the truth is, people reveal who they are when they're around their close friends. You can tell a lot about a person with how they react and interact with the person that they're most comfortable with. And here we see a guy who is very comfortable with being the worst, the absolute worst. Someone who is incapable of accepting you for who you are is not your friend, and you definitely should not spend hours upon hours every week playing a TTRPG with them. It's not worth it, especially since, as we've seen with many horror stories, people use TTRPGs as extensions of themselves. And here we see a DM who uses a TTRPG to joke around, make fun of, and mock somebody. Given that this guy is 18, I'm assuming the other people at this table are young as well, but that's not really an excuse. At this point, you're an adult. You have responsibility for the things that you say and the things that you do. This is the dude who just never grew up, that edgy kid who thinks that the worst things are funny and who annoys everyone around him. We all know that one kid, and I think we all hate him too. This is an old story, 10-ish years old, but it's the one that stuck with me. Playing a game of Rogue Trader with a few bits of Dark Heresy mixed in, and some house rules to make them all fit. I was playing a tech priestess named Winry, very loosely based on Winry Rockbell from Full Metal Alchemist. She had a passion for bionics, and believed she was doing the Messiah's work by making the crippled and maimed whole by granting them the blessings of steel. As I'm sure you know from the brief character description, she was technically a woman. In more practical terms, she was basically the final boss from RoboCop 2, a brutal engine of technological violence. Remember this because it's gonna be important. Now, the campaign started out great. The Rogue Trader was the last heir of an impoverished dynasty, and we were tooling around in a frigate trying to rebuild his family's wealth and power. A few adventurers playing pirates/totally legal privateers treasure hunting in ancient and non-heretical human ruins, and totally not ripping off multiple Star Trek episodes adapted to fit in 40k. And then that guy joined a few sessions in. Our arch-militant had to drop out of the game for work or something, so a few of us asked around for someone wanting to join and take the slot. We'd have preferred they adapt to the existing characters because he was kind of entangled into the plot, but we weren't married to any ideas. But luckily, the new guy was happy to adopt the arch-militant. Red flags started fairly soon. I think the first was during a visit to the guard base, where we had a working relationship with the local general. We'd acquire things or get jobs done that weren't practical via normal means. Basically, this guy was a quest giver. While walking around the base, the GM was narrating the activity around us just to set the atmosphere, when that guy interrupted to ask if there was a pleasure place around here. It's a military base, so I assume there'd be one not far away, but I haven't planned anything like, yeah, he wanted to go to the House of Lady Favors. We made it clear the other player characters were going to the meeting with the general quest giver, so he declared that he'd go alone. The game is kind of going that way, so if your character wanders off, you're basically just sitting out until they hook back up. Are you sure you want to do that? And then we all realized he expected the game master to play out both parties and wanted to roleplay his visit to the House of Lady Favors, which wasn't happening. He went anyway, apparently thinking he could just act out his roleplay and we'd go along with it. Yeah, that was a fun conversation to have. The next bit of drama came after we'd mostly completed the mission from our general. A pirate ship interrupted a supply shipment from his regiment, and the Navy put the issue on a waiting list that basically amounted to, your grandkids might hear back about this. So we tracked them down, and there was a fight in a nebular that was a combination of Down Pressoscope and Wrath of Karn. It was awesome. But we captured them and began marching all enemy crew with a rank into holding. The wounded I was going to turn into murder servitors, while the healthy would get sold into a planetary government with ever-hungry factories that needed prisoners with jobs. So these guys are basically our prisoners with jobs now, and we can do whatever we want. Are there any women in the group? Yeah. Why? Yeah, I'm sure you can guess why. We told him no, hard no, then he started complaining about how I cut people up and turned them into murder servitors, and the recruit player ate people regularly, and the rogue trader ordered the bombardment of a city and slaughtered billions not long ago. We briefed this guy on past events. And yeah, this is Warhammer 40k, and by in real life standards, we'd all be horrific monsters, and in character, we'd have absolutely no grounds to complain. He kinda got his way, but still complained that we 100% fade to black his crap. No, the GM isn't running a scene where you drag your prisoners with intimate jobs into your cabin. We already wanted him gone, but he was a friend of one of the other players, and it would have been really awkward for him. He and the game master were going to talk to that guy and get him to accept that this isn't a game where that kind of content is okay. And it doubly wasn't a game where his kind of intimate content was okay. He behaved after that for a while. Later, we ran into a cult/crime syndicate that spanned the local subsector, who had been reoccurring antagonists and rivals. We captured a few high-ranking members and were planning to enhanced interrogation them when that guy returned to form. He'd been fined for a few sessions, which I guess is why the game master didn't think anything of making some of our prisoners women. You can guess the enhanced interrogation method he wanted to use on the female prisoners. And yeah, no. To hell with that. My character is a tech priest specializing in bionics. I have an in-character reason to stop this, and I'm gonna use it. I called dibs on the prisoners, put them in my workshop, and basically cracked them open and shoved USB ports in their brains. Objectively worse, yeah, but dang it, it was goofy, over the top, it was supervillain crap that was impossible to take seriously. It wasn't Ted Bundy in space. Pretty sure that's literally a plot point in Scott Pilgrim, a PG-13 movie, so I think you're good. I mean, it is something that the horrible bad guy does, but still, you know, PG-13 bad guy. That guy threw a tantrum and decided he was going to throw down with my character and teach her place. Yeah, he actually wanted to beat and assault my character. No way the game master would have let that happen, but as mentioned above, my character was a 7-foot-tall murder cyborg that would be considered a walking war crime if such a concept existed in 40K. So, yeah, he died. He wasn't at the next game, but apparently there was so much wheedling and promises to behave that I wasn't around for, so he was back a session later. His new character was an ex-guard demolitions expert who apparently hated the ad meds for reasons, and yeah, it soon became evident that he just begged his way back into the game to be a troll and get some petty revenge. He planned demolition charges outside my workshop, planning to give me when I got out. I deployed an army of murder servitors and activated the auto turrets in the hallway to set him up. I'm the ship's chief tech priest, you idiot. You think I can't access the internal security systems? He had the nerve to complain about me metagaming for bothering to check security. Yeah, like the GM is going to rule in your favor. Everyone at the table knew we'd be kicking you at the end of the current game. Your character living or dying doesn't matter. I felt sorry for the Navigator player as they were work friends and he had to deal with the idiot complaining for a while, but we all agreed he needed to go. We did a whole video about how in-game solutions to out-of-game problems don't work, but, I mean, come on, this was kind of fun, right? And in the end, they did kick the guy out, which is the real solution to this problem. This actually brings up an interesting question. Why is some content okay in games, and why is other content not okay in games? And frankly, you don't really need a reason. The real reason is that people aren't comfortable. This group set a boundary. They set a line. No creepy business. And this dude jumped right over that line. And it doesn't matter if the group are okay with other mature content. They set that boundary. You should respect it. And if you can't respect it, get out of the game. This group, they did the right thing, hitting the brakes and getting this guy out of their game. Alright, and that's it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. I'm back from vacation, it's good to be home, and it's good to be back on the series. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, where we cover D&D advice for DMs and players old and new, and while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Virgin Fantasy. Really? To let me know you made it to the end of the video. Oh, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, there's an email in the description. Send them our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, unless like, comment, subscribe, I'll see you all next time. Farewell.